even if you're not old enough to remember the TV show Dragnet, and I think there are a few out here who don't remember that, there's a line that everyone knows in popular culture. And when Joe Friday interviews a female witness, what does he always say?
Just the facts.
Just the facts, ma'am. Let me hear it.
Just the facts, ma'am.
Right, just the facts. But the problem with the facts is the facts, they're boring. I mean, that's what you get in school, that's what you learn just in time for the test, and that's what you forget right after the test. But you can take facts, take those same facts, and you can turn it into an interesting and suspenseful story. And I use this when I'm doing speeches, short stories, and it really applies to book-length stories too. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about how you can take the facts and turn it from just the facts into a suspenseful story. And there's three things that you want. First of all, you want a hook, something to get people interested, get their attention right away. This is true if you're doing fiction, nonfiction, telling a story. You got somehow to hook people and get them interested. Now the last thing you want is you need some kind of twist or climax. So you're saving information to the end. And if you do a straight news story, you tell the most important facts up front. Now in this case, what you want to do is you want to save the important fact and save it to the end. And then what happens in between that hook and the climax is you build up to that climax. And I'm going to give you an example, and then you're going to go ahead and pick out the different parts. And this is a true story. Most of the stories I tell are true, or I make them up. So this true story is about my barber who had a very creepy customer. Now this customer just made her nervous. Now if you went into your barber or your hairdresser, they'd chat, say, hey, how you doing? You'd talk to them, say, oh, I'm doing fine. Oh, so how was your new year? Fine. Well, this guy would come in and she'd say, hey, how you doing? Fine. Any plans for the weekend? Nope. So it was all monosyllabic words. He just kind of creepy little guy. Well, one day, it was a November evening. It was dark. He was the last customer. All her other barbers had gone home, so it was just her and him in the barber shop before closing. And she had been reading a book about Jeffrey Dahmer. So, of course, this guy always makes her creepy. Here she is, it's dark, and she's reading this book. And so what does she do when she's nervous? She talks. So what does she talk about? She talks about the Jeffrey Dahmer book. And so he doesn't respond to anything. She finishes up, closes up the shop. He leaves. She's so relieved. She says, I just don't like being around that guy. Well, the reason that she felt creepy around him is because several weeks later they arrested him because he was Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. So in that story, what is the hook? What was the hook? Right, creepy customers. Already you're thinking. The build, you tell about how she didn't like him. You talk about the night, and then what is the suspense of the climax? It's Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Now, how many of you have ever worked for a newspaper? If you're going to tell that story, so you work for a newspaper, if you're going to tell that story, what would you start off with? Yeah, Gary Ridgway used to hang out at this barber shop. So that's how that started. So we're going to do an exercise here, and we're going to take a story that all of you should know, and you're going to, at your table, you're going to come up with a hook. You're going to come up with a couple different elements of the build, and then you're going to come up with a climax. All right, and we won't have a chance to do all these, but I'll ask you to yell out a few different answers. So this is a story you should all know. It's the nativity story. Now, if you don't know this story, you must have wandered in off the street, but don't leave because we have really good news for you later. So at your table, you have a couple minutes. Go ahead and come up with the hook for the nativity story, a couple elements from the build, and then the climax. And you have 3 minutes. All right, we ready?
I spent 3 hours working on one.
All right, who wants to tell me the hook for their table for the nativity story? What's a good hook? Back here.
Pregnant mom claims she's a virgin.
Pregnant mom claims she's a virgin. Who would believe that? That's a good hook. What's another hook? Is there another good hook?
Yeah, sure. Bright star like a UFO.
Say
It's a
what?
UFO, the bright star.
A bright star. There's a UFO in the heavens. Okay, good. What else? Another hook?
Labor pains were increasing and no place to go.
Labor pains are increasing and no place to go. Okay, good. So what are some elements of a bill? I'm sorry, one more?
There's a horrible snowstorm in December.
There's a horrible snowstorm in December.
And two people are struggling to push through.
Okay? All right, so what are some build items? So what are some items you use to build up to the climax? I hear mumbling.
The temperature's rising.
Travel. Long travel, temperatures. What are other elements of the story?
Does the boy keep her, or does he
You gotta find a room that they can't.
Oh, okay, so she's saying, is he going to keep her or is he going to dump her? So that's a good build.
Teenager in labor.
Teenager in labor. Well, that's not uncommon nowadays. But... All right.
Strangers come to visit.
Strangers come to visit. Okay, so those are some of the items that you use to build. Okay, how about a climax? Give me a good climax. What? The Son of God. This baby is the Son of God. Wow. That's a good climax.
The power of salvation.
Power of salvation. Other good hooks. Or not hooks. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords is born. And he's a baby, came to us in a manger. Okay, great. Great ideas. So you see, basically, you just take a story and you make sure that the key element that a newspaper would report first is reported at the end. You start off with a hook, just like you do any story or article, and then you build to it. So I'd like you to practice that. If you want good examples, I have a couple others that are on my website. And this week, late this week, I'll be publishing another one about a well-known Seattle figure. And he has a really interesting background that I'll tell you about. And my website is dennisbrooke.com. If you do a search on my name, the top 10 items are usually my name. And I have cards. But think about that. When you're telling stories, writing stories, you want a hook, you want to build to it, and then you want the climax. Thanks.